G'day folks, and welcome to Gormo's Shed. Today what I'm going to show you is a method I've sort of come up with. I don't know whether anybody else has done this, but it's the way I do it. A method for making little flowers in some of your fields and on your grassy areas. Now you see this in countryside in England. It's quite common to see daisies and whatever and wildflowers growing. And I've come up with a way which gives an impression of that, makes it look as though it's almost the real thing. Now what I'm using as a medium is this shell grit for budgies and parrots and whatever, and cage birds in other words, and this stuff is supposed to help their digestive system. See, it's actually a whole bunch of tiny little shells. And believe it or not, I use this stuff as ballast on my railway. Not as little shells like that, but I've put it through my coffee grinder to grind it up and make it sort of turn it into white ballast. Now powder's probably not the right word, but it's somewhere between powder and some sort of medium. So I used my trusty Kmart coffee grinder that was 14 bucks, and we've used this before, as you know, to do homemade flocking. Now we just add some shell grit to the grinder. Don't need much, because a little bit goes a long way, folks. Now we'll give that a whiz. Right, now when you open this thing, folks, there'll be quite a bit of powder or dust generated. So I'd suggest you leave the lid on and take the grinder outside somewhere and just let the dust escape. Or if you're doing it, staying indoors, just make sure you've got a mask on. Okay, now that's changed the consistency of the shell grit. I mean, there's still some biggish bits in there, but that doesn't matter, but there's a lot of fine particles as well. So the next stage is we want to give it some colour. So what I've been using initially is, this is airbrush acrylic, but that's quite an intense yellow. However, you could just use normal acrylic, yellow, blue, red, whatever you want to use. Colour's up to you, and then of course with acrylics you can mix and match and sort of change the tone. So we won't go into changing colours and all that sort of thing at this stage, because the basic colours, red, yellow and blue, work quite well. The one thing you've got to keep in mind though is if you try and mix white into this, nothing happens. I don't think there's enough pigment in white paint to sort of actually change the colour of the shell grit. So white is a dead loss, but we'll come to how you use white later on. So for this little experiment, we'll just use some yellow, and I'll just give it a couple of squirts in there. There's about 4 drops, and we'll get the lid on. So we've given it a whiz, folks, and a real good shake and everything, and it's come out with this sort of intensity. It's quite intense actually. It's sort of curry powder yellow, if you like. Now folks, this is the one I just did. I've just taken it out of the grinder, cleaned the grinder up. That's probably one of the most important things, is when you finish doing this stuff with paint in there, clean the grinder up, because you don't want paint drying in there. As I said, this is the one I did just now, and this is one from yesterday. So you can see a difference in the tone. The one on the right is much lighter, and that's simply because there's less paint in there. You get much more intensity the more paint you add in. Now folks, the method of putting it on. Now I've got the same colour I started with yesterday, because I want to keep it looking pretty much the same in that area. I've got some standard PVA and a little tray and a flat brush. Well, it's a bit old and battered around, but it'll do the job. Now what we do is just give ourselves a blob of PVA on the little tray, which is actually an ice cream container lid, plastic, and nothing seems to stick to it, so it's ideal, folks. Right, now folks, you load up your brush lightly with some PVA, and I suggest you probably get down to eye level to do this. And what you need to do is just lightly brush across the top of the grass with the PVA. Now I've got a blob on there, so there's a bit of a knack to it. And that'll do. I'll try and get that blob off with my fingers. That's better. Now we just get a pinch of powder in between the fingers and just lightly sprinkle it over the area where the PVA is. I'll just get a bit more. And I'll just turn the camera so you can see that a bit better. There we are. A little bit more. Right, that's fine. Now what I'll do is get a vacuum cleaner and just remove the excess that's fallen down below the tops of the bits of grass. So this is going to make a bit of noise, folks. Just turn the machine on. And there we have it. So that's what was just done. Just as simple as that. Now folks, remember that I said that white is not good. It just doesn't take up in the shell grit. So I thought, well, how am I going to do white? And the simple answer is a piece of chalk. Now that's a standard white piece of chalk. Now if you scrape the side of that, it will turn into chalk powder, which can be sprinkled onto the grass the same way that I've just done this. The powder is finer, but it still gives a good effect. If you're doing N gauge, it's spot on. So there's your white. Now if we're talking about chalks as well, chalks come in various colours. Here's a pink, and I mean pink is quite good. There's also a purple here. So you know, and these cost nothing. I don't think we'd have a green flower, but there's a blue, probably a bit light, but you never know. You know, you can make up a multicoloured garden, folks, just with chalks. So that's the easy system, just using chalks. The shell grit takes a bit more work, but you get a bigger particle with the shell grit. Now folks, if you want to go down another route of making, say, individual bunches of flowers, you can do it this way. This is a piece of baking paper, and I've just taped it to my cutting mat so that I can see a grid underneath. And what you do is put a little drop of PVA spaced out maybe every second square, depending on how many of these things you want to make. Just a little drop of PVA. And spread it out however you like. And then you can use static grass and your static grass maker, your machine, whatever you've got, to make little clumps of static grass, and they look like that. So these are some I made yesterday. Now you can use those as little individual clumps of grass, and they come off quite easily. Once the glue's dry, you just give it a flick and it's off. So you can take that and glue it down somewhere. Now you can use those as little clumps of grass. You might want to put it on a bit of track or something like that, or indeed you can use the method I've just showed you for creating flowers to make some little flowers. Now you may notice over the back here, where are we, just here, that I've got these bits of, this is actually green garden string. I think it's made from hemp, and just cut off whatever length you like and glue it to one of those little blobs of PVA, and you can make something sticking up of any length you like, and you can turn those into flowers if you want. I've got one here which is quite small. I'll try and bring it to the camera if I can find the camera. Yeah, that's one that was done yesterday just as an experiment. Now that's chalk on there. That's how the chalk works. And the little individual clumps of grass, if I can show you, where are we? Come up like that. So yes, this method with the baking paper was shown to me by Gary from Platform 1. I've seen him do that, so I've knocked off your idea there, Gary. But what you can do is just make up a sheet and save it, and leave them on there until you're ready to use them. So there you go. Well, there you are, folks. It's pretty cheap. It's pretty easy. I think you just need to get a bit of practice in, as I do, at doing it, and I think it'll work out pretty well, actually. And you know, we're doing a lot of cruel close-ups here, but a lot of this stuff is about an impression that you get from about 3 foot away. So from 3 foot away, it just looks like a little field of flowers. So I mean, that'll do me. Anyway, see you next time. Cheers. Gormo.